Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of the Fair Housing Insiders. And believe it or not, we are in season 2. So, welcome to 2021. And Kathy, it's so exciting to be in our second season and to start us off with a new set of great educational topics for our community. Welcome again to the show.
Hey, Jonathan, and I totally agree. I have a feeling that this is going to be quite the year for fair housing. And we're going to be right there throughout the year talking about it, thinking about it, and offering our very best suggestions for our housing community.
Yeah, and a great subject that we're going to dig into again today, talking about assistance animals and emotional support animals. Out of all the sessions that we've talked and discussed and wrote about on the website, that was one of the most popular for 2020 was assistance animals and dealing with some different scenarios. So thank you everyone for being here. Just a reminder, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell so you're notified whenever there's a new season, or excuse me, a new episode and session that comes available. We're moving to a lot more sessions going into 2021 because there's just so many topics that we feel are so valuable, and we want to make sure we get this information to you. So thank you again for being here with us today. So today's topic is about assistance animals and about emotional support animals. But what we're going to look at today, and Kathy's really going to dive in for us, is some different scenes that many property managers and leasing professionals face when a resident or a prospect walks in the door. We're going to focus on 3 particular scenes and play the scene for you, and then we'll have Kathy's feedback on, okay, what should you do in these types of scenarios? A lot of questions come up, such as, what does the Fair Housing Act say about emotional support animals? Can a housing provider deny an emotional support animal? Can a breed restriction be applied to an emotional support animal or an assistance animal? So lots of questions that you've asked that these scenarios will definitely address and be able to help you stay fair housing compliant. And that's the idea, isn't it? So our first scene we're going to take a look at. So just imagine a prospect comes and wants to rent an apartment from you, and they have a 100-pound pit bull named Cujo. How would you react when a prospect comes to you with this type of animal and says that they're an emotional support animal? Well, let's take a look at our scene, and then we'll get Kathy's feedback on it.
I'm looking for a place to live that will accommodate me and my dog Cujo.
Cujo? What a fun name. I bet Cujo is a tiny 5-pound chihuahua, right?
Actually, he's a 100-pound pit bull, but he's my emotional support dog, and I can't live anywhere unless he comes with me.
Oh, well, that's different. I'm sorry, but like most communities in the area, we have breed and size restrictions for pets, and sadly, Cujo doesn't qualify. Maybe you could look to find a private home or an apartment for rent?
Well, the problem with the response by our leasing agent, who tends to do a lot of things wrong, if you'll notice in our little scenes, is that at least from what the applicant or the prospect is saying, this is not a pet. Mm-hmm. If indeed it is an emotional support animal, then you cannot apply your pet restrictions, which probably include size and breed restrictions. You can't apply those to an assistance animal, which would include an emotional support animal. So the response is completely wrong. Instead, the response should be that, first of all, let's let that prospect apply for housing, get accepted into your housing, and then let's process a request for a reasonable accommodation using your forms and your procedures and your documentation to decide whether we can indeed, or whether you should, acknowledge that dog as an emotional support animal? If so, then regardless of Cujo's size or breed, Cujo's probably going to live at your property with his or her owner.
Right. Right. Very good. Thank you for explaining that. So don't do what that leasing professional did in that scene. That's the number, big time takeaway, and follow your policies and procedures. So that's a common scenario that comes up. So our next scene involves a non-observable disability from an existing resident. So an existing resident is there, lives there, and then management finds out that they have a cat and it wasn't disclosed. So let's look at our scene, see how it's handled, and we'll get your feedback on what you should do. Let's take a look.
Mr. Katz, I'm calling because our maintenance team has reported that they saw a cat in your apartment when they went in to service your dishwasher. Your lease doesn't show that you have a pet, and it's a violation of your lease to have a pet without notifying management and paying pet rent.
I don't need to let you know. I have a disability and I can have my cat live with me if I want to. I even flew to visit my daughter, and they let her come on the plane with me because I have a letter that says she's my support animal.
This scenario presents a couple of problems for our friendly leasing agent. The first problem is that the resident did not identify that they had this cat, and it's probably a violation of the rules to have an animal that you don't identify to management when you bring the animal in your property. So the first instinct for most leasing agents is to issue a lease violation, maybe even a termination notice because of this violation. And that might be okay eventually. The first thing, though, that has to be addressed is that when the resident identifies that cat as an emotional support animal, now you have to process that request. You can't terminate the resident and then process it. You process it immediately upon the resident raising it and decide whether they actually can verify that that cat is necessary because of a disability. Now, in this scenario, the resident is waving around an ESA letter that apparently they got off the internet, and it's not hard to do that. And a lot of people who are trying to pretend a pet is an emotional support animal is finding their way to therapists around the country who they get referred to by those online certification companies. And then once they talk to the therapist, then the therapist sends them out a boilerplate ESA letter that says they get to have this animal, that they're disabled, and that usually throws in something about the airlines as well, by the way. That's how oftentimes you'll know that they're a ESA purchased verification letter. So that when the housing provider is deciding whether to grant this cat recognition as an emotional support animal, it's going to have to decide whether this ESA letter actually shows that this verifier who signed it has personal knowledge of this resident, of their disability, and of their need for this animal. And if it doesn't, then that ESA letter is not going to be what we call reliable verification justifying that emotional support cat.
Very nice. What an excellent explanation. So thank you for that. A lot of details to be considered in those scenarios, and it's been a pain point for our industry, these ESA letters that can be purchased online. So excellent walk through, Kathy, on what can and should be done in those scenarios. Again, to make sure that you're fair housing compliant, and we take care of our residents and we take care of our company also. So that leads us to our third scenario that we're going to discuss today. And this scene is more along the lines that we've got an applicant that's approved to live in the community. And after that approval, then comes in with an ESA and states that they have multiple pets, like they have 2 dogs that need to be with them. So let's take a look at our scene involving this particular instance, and we'll get your take on that, Kathy.
I'm moving in on Friday, and I just wanted to let you know that I have 2 dogs that are moving in with me. I have a letter here that shows that they're both emotional support animals. Wait, you have 2 emotional support animals? You can't have 2. I've never heard of anyone needing 2 support animals.
This scenario is one that unfortunately is getting to be more and more common. Now that housing providers around the country have been permitting assistance animals as a reasonable accommodation to their pet policy, now residents are asking for more than 1 assistance animal. And this needs to be processed. This should not be just rejected like it was by our leasing agent in the scenario. You might end up getting to say no at the end, but first you have to process it. So in this case, again, we have one of these boilerplate purchased ESA letters, and you have to review the letter to see whether it shows personal knowledge of the resident and whether it explains the need for each of those 2 dogs. If it doesn't, it's not adequate verification to verify why does this person need 2. So the request form you send to your resident at the point they let you know they've got 2 dogs, or your prospect or your applicant, whoever, should ask about the need for each animal. And the resident should first have to explain why they need animal 1, why they need animal 2, and sometimes even I've had situations where they ask for 3.
Right.
And then you look at those. If those are all the same reason, then they don't need 2 or 3. Then when you go to the verifier, you again ask, why is animal 1 needed, animal 2 needed? And you see what the verifier says. Does it match what the resident says? And does it indicate a different and separate need for each animal? If not, at that point, the housing provider is able to reject the request for 2 animals, let them know if you're going to accept 1 animal, and give the reason that they were not able to provide verification of need for both animals. So those are going to be common occurrences, and you need to pretty much be ready to deal with those multiple assistance animal requests.
Right. Very good. I noticed a lot of common words in all 3 scenarios. There's a process, there's documentation, and it's really important to not be tainted by media, because there's a lot of news articles out there about this topic. Airlines are talking a lot about it. We know there's a lot within our own industry, of course, that are talking about it. But it's really well said, Kathy, how we have to follow that process. We have to understand what the Fair Housing Act states and how it relates to emotional support animals and assistance animals. So very, very good. Thank you so much for some nice, clear explanations on what we can do. So we're happy again, right, Kathy? Here we are. Episode 15, season 2, lots of streamers and balloons. And yeah, here we are. We had a great year in 2020 and so grateful to start off 2021 with this episode that has been a very, very popular topic. So just remember, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that notification bell as well. Give us the thumbs up if you've really enjoyed this episode, and be sure to check out our other episodes. At the end of this video, there'll be another suggested video that you may not have seen before. So stick around to the end to see if there's other content that you feel will be a benefit to you, and share this with your team. Use this in your fair housing training that you use with your site team or at your leadership conferences. Lots of benefits that can be made from these complimentary educational episodes that the Fair Housing Institute provides. So we want to appreciate you being here. Be sure to check out fairhousinginstitute.com, see all of our online course options. And again, thank you, Kathy, for your insights, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Take care, everyone.